We're still waiting on the start of the show, huh?
Yes,
Everybody, please
we're
mute
trying to get things in order with our technician.
Well, hello there. Welcome to another marriage forum. We are going to get started here. We're excited about what we're going to be talking about, premarital counseling. It's a must. There are a lot of couples out there that are jumping across that and they're not being successful in their marriages. So we felt that this was a topic that we needed to address. Danny, is there something you want to talk about before we turn it over to Dr. Faye?
No, ma'am. No, we're good. Let's jump in it.
Well, Dr. Faye, it is in your hands.
Well, good evening. Good evening. It is so good to be here. I think that this particular marriage text work forum is probably one of the most important and critical forums that we've done. One of the things that's so critical to premarital counseling is understanding the providence in terms of how God created us. God created us to be attracted to persons. It's so amazing how God made us, because even as we encounter and engage and meet people, there are chemical, biological reactions that happen that cause us to be attracted to people. Unfortunately, there's so many other things that happen that we're going to talk about. And so sometimes persons might make choices and decisions based on that initial chemical reaction, not thinking about all the other things that come as a result. So tonight, what we will be doing, I have some foundational questions I will ask to get this conversation started. And so let's just jump right in here now and start with whoever wants to begin to answer this question. And that question is, why do you feel it's important for any couple who is considering getting married to engage in premarital counseling?
Well, I feel like it's essential because counseling, the Bible describes that, in the multitude of counsel, there's safety. So getting counseling helps you to pre-ready yourself for the ups and downs of marriage. A lot of times people get into marriage thinking, I guess their focus is the bliss of the day of marriage, and they don't really prepare for the day after the wedding. And counseling helps them to understand some of the things that you may go through, some of the things that you may not go through, some of the things you want to prepare for, how to weather the storms of life. And I feel like that foundation sets you up for an advantage versus people who just jump into marriage and use it as and don't even not prepare for what's going to come next.
Well, thank you so much for that. Go ahead, Mr. Latasha.
I think it forces you to, I guess, address issues that you probably don't know to address as you're dating or as you are engaged. You're going to tackle some issues. You're going to like, I never thought about that, so it's going to force you to look at some things that may have come up or may not have come up, but some deeper issues or just deeper topics that should be discussed prior to people getting married. So it's gonna force you to dig deep into who you are, into who he is, into who you all are together and who you're going to become together.
Thank you for that, because what I've heard you all say is that you got to dig deeper into some things that you haven't thought about.
Mm-hmm.
Some things that, as Elder Scott said, you may not have thought about, but will come up, and these pre-concerns are important to address early on.
Right.
Well, I would add to that, that when you are going through premarital counseling, it kind of opens you up to changes that are going to possibly be needed in you. I remember we used to sing a song years ago. It says, things I used to do, I don't do no more. And so we have to get in that mindset right there in premarital counseling. Am I really going to make the necessary changes that I need to do to get in this marriage and make it work? A lot of people put a lot of emphasis in the wedding day, and they don't even look at what they need to be doing in the marriage. So they're things that they're going to really have to face. It's not about me, it's about us. If I eat, is my husband full? If I eat and I'm the husband, is my wife full? We got to think in that respect, that it's not just about me anymore, it's about us.
Thank you.
Right.
When I look at premarital counseling, it's a space for couples to really openly share their thoughts and their feelings in a safe, confidential environment. Sometimes things go unspoken. Those small issues that need to be addressed that may blow up in their faces, as we go into the marriage. It's an opportunity for you to sit, gain some insight from the person who you're sitting with, and look at those things that you may need to explore as you sit, as you talk about those things with that marital counselor.
So before we go to Pastor McGhee and Lady Takia, I just heard self-inventory and a safe space to discover. Okay. Pastor McGhee.
I would say everything has pretty much been answered. I would say it creates deeper conversations. As the Scott says before, it's some things come up in counseling that you just honestly don't think about. Because you're so mesmerized by the dating period, you're mesmerized by the wedding date and all the planning that you're not even thinking about necessary conversations that you need to have with your spouse before you actually walk down the aisle and say, I do.
And I'll jump in and say, when we just got engaged, I didn't know premarital counseling was an option, right? I mean, that is like people now, it's like they pick and choose whether they want to do it or not. It wasn't an option for us. Like Pastor Walker was not going to marry us without premarital counseling. So I didn't know I could say no, right? Because his thing was you have to do this or I'm not going to do your wedding. So you just knew that coming into it. But I think the other thing that premarital counseling does is it allows some level of freedom and liberation from from family and friends definition of marriage,
Mhm.
right? Because depending upon your context, you know, your marital advice may have come from people who never been married or who may have messed up in marriage, but they're now bitter about it. But also it helps establish a foundation for what you want your marriage to end up being. I mean, there was in ours a lot of questions being asked. There's also a lot of scripture being laid out to us as well. And you realize that, you know, the Bible says two become one. It says that, but now you got to work that. And that's not as easy as it sounds, right? Especially depending upon your upbringing, what you're bringing to the table. And so, Elder Marcus said something profound, which is, you know, people get so caught up on the bliss. And I tell this to couples all the time, you spend weeks and months planning your wedding. That ceremony is like 15, 20 minutes, right? Like literally you spend a lot of money for a 15, 20-minute moment.
Yeah.
Then you get married, you look at each other like, now what do we do now? And the worst thing you want to do is get married and not have any money after you get married. And one thing premarital counseling does is help you remember the why of your marriage and keeping a foundation solid.
Mhm.
Well, I would say this. When we got married, premarital counseling was not even thought of.
Unexistent.
Okay, we were doing just what you just said. So what do we do now?
Yeah.
We spent the money on the wedding. You know, it was of course nothing like people spend on marriages right on weddings.
Yeah.
But we spent the money on the wedding, and then we were riding in one car together. And I mean, it's like, what do we do?
Yeah.
We did not know what to do at that moment. We did not.
Yeah.
So I want to piggyback on everything that everybody said, but I want to highlight that being mesmerized by the person and so caught up in the euphoria. And what I began with, I want to extend that in terms of there is an actual biological, physiological, chemical reaction that God developed in us.
Amen.
To be able to reproduce, be attracted. You know, he told us to, you know, to multiply. And there's a way in which the body responds. So when we're attracted to someone, there's this thing called dopamine that's released, cortisol that's released. It causes us to feel so good about the person. And the crazy thing about dopamine is the same chemical that helps numb pain. So it helps us not to see a lot of the challenges, the issues, because we're on this actual high. God created us that way. The problem is after about 6 months or so, it starts to the dopamine, this actual biological chemical,
Wears off.
starts to wear off. And then there's another chemical that starts to develop to help us to attach and connect. But what happens if in the process of this other chemical developing, we have nothing in common?
My goodness.
And all we saw and felt was the euphoria.
Wow.
So the next question is, what are things you feel are important to bring out in premarital counseling?
For me, I want to start from the very beginning. I want to talk about God's design for marriage. So my first question is foundational. How do both of you stand in your relationship with God? I think that's crucial. If they don't have a foundation, you don't have anything. And so my thing is, where are you? What does your faith tells you? What's your relationship with God? If there's something in that we need to work on, I need to work that first before we move forward. If you don't believe and you see that, we got to talk that thing out. And I have the option to say to you right now, I think this is not a good time.
Talk, sir.
For you to get to connect, because we need that. If you don't have that foundation, you're up to a rough start, rocky start, and it's not going to last.
Yeah, that is so true. I think, and I guess my mindset comes from, I guess, the scripture, how God will try us. And from the perspective of doing marriage counseling and having been in marriage counseling, the first thing I think of is I got to get these people to be real with each other.
Yes, sir.
Because a lot of times the man or the woman is playing a role to get. And then once that person says I do, then the real them shows up. And so I feel like as a person who has been in marriage counseling, and the person who's done marriage counseling, as a couple who's done marriage counseling, our job is to get them to be real with each other. Y'all haven't argued yet. Let me see you guys argue. Is he gonna hit you? Let's see, get him mad, because I need her to see who he really is. I need him to see who she really is. Because at the end of the day, like I said, we're so caught up on the dopamine, that chemical, that we're not worried about what happens tomorrow. When I mean by tomorrow, the day after the wedding. And then when you see that person, you're like, who is this that I married? And so I feel like it's our job as people who do marriage counseling, and it's also the goal of the person who is taking marriage counseling, to get to know the person that you're about to marry. Is that person, try them. Have y'all even saved? Have y'all talked about saving? What's going to happen? Or so we've done one where the woman has a child, but not by the fiance.
Brother.
Okay.
Brother.
Have we talked about how that's going to work with the natural father? And those type of things, that natural father's family, what's going to happen when he wants to come see his child? Can he knock on your wife's door when you're not here? Those type of things, and we ask those questions because those are the type of questions that's gonna survive, keep a marriage together, or make a marriage break apart. It's those everyday life and those everyday obstacles that I guess is our goal as a marriage, marriage counselors, to get at.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? And I'm gonna piggyback on what you said, because we are calling those deal breakers.
Yeah.
They're flat out, they're called deal breakers. And some of those deal breakers can go as far as if someone wants to have a child. You cannot change a person that says, I don't want children. I already have kids. So if they tell you up front and you want kids, that's a deal breaker. That says don't move forward with that person, because that person does not want you to be a mother or a father, something you want to be.
And can I say this too? It's so hard, because a lot of times the couple will be so doped up on this dopamine that they're not even hearing the truth that you're telling them.
They don't.
I've heard, we've told people y'all might want to wait on this marriage, and they didn't listen to us, and when they got married, was gone in less than 2 or 3 months, was divorced. And so it's our job to make sure they hear the truth, because at the end of the day, us standing there, I feel like we're responsible for not for their marriage, but for bringing God's truth into their marriage.
There you go.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like when one of our homeworks is for them to write down their roles as a wife and a husband. I'm not going to write down my role as a wife. I'm going to tell them what I feel the role of a husband is. You know what I'm saying? They may not have that conversation, because what I feel the role of the husband is you might not feel that's what your role is. You see what I'm saying? So you get to see it from my perspective, which we probably never talked about. But I get to hear from your perspective. But then, I don't want them, we tell them quick. No, come and talking about you want him to be a priest, provider, and protector. We know that. Who's gonna take this trash out? Who's gonna get the oil change? Who's making the mortgage payment? You know what I'm saying? Everyday things that come up that can build up and lead to problems if it's not figured out and talked about. But those are some situations that, people don't have an idea of what's going on. Oh, I want to be a priest, provider, and protector. Well, I'm that, so let's go. But no, we need to dig deeper than that. Need not even deeper, just surface. Like I said, who gonna change these diapers?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna say this, because in some situations, the woman goes in the marriage making more money than the man. And so, there's some men that would have a problem with the wife making more money. That needs to come out. And then, so now you said who's going to pay the mortgage,
Mhm.
it's going to be us that pay the mortgage.
Mhm.
Us. This is not a me. This is not a you anymore. It's us. And seeing the problem that a lot of millennials hate to do is fold that money together. But I'm telling y'all, I told y'all before, we was on almost like two big old zeros. But guess what? Them two big old zeros came together and formed more money.
Mhm.
But you know, how everybody choose to do their money, that's how they do their money. I know what we had to do for us, but then they also have to learn in premarital counseling communication.
Mhm.
Are you somebody that would apologize? It's like Marcus said, you got to get somebody to the point to see who the real person is. Because right now, you just seeing a person that's just, I'm just so excited. You see this diamond he gave me. We're getting married. And oh, I can't wait to be his wife.
Mhm.
The mask.
But
It's mask.
but listen, we got to make sure that they take that mask off in
Right.
premarital counseling.
You're right.
So if I can share, I agree with everything. For me, so one of the things that we do with couples in premarital counseling, and it was kind of mentioned, we have a whole session on finances.
Yes.
Where prior to the session, I send a budget worksheet, and I make them, it's two parts. So the first part is you have to rank your bills, right? So we take tithe off as number one, right? Put everything else in order. And they both get their own worksheet. And then you have money left over. And we tell them, okay, tell us what would you do with the remaining amount. We'll never tell you spend all your money. We want to use it as an example. And you will be amazed at the responses you get, right? First of all, you're amazed at people, how they rank their monies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've had couples who will put, they'll put mortgage or rent as number 2 at the tithe. They'll put, they'll put cars as number 3, or put cable as number 3. Utilities number 7. But bro, you can't watch TV without utilities. Like, come on, are we not thinking? It's always interesting is the money left over, because we've seen things where we had, it may be like $1,400 left over. We had one couple where the lady said, well, she's going to spend $700 on her weave, $300 on her nails. He said he was going to spend, $1,000 on his wardrobe, right? All these type of things. It's always interesting how they rank the importance of life insurance and
Wow,
things,
yeah.
right? They don't think about stuff like that. So finances to me is a critical conversation beyond, after you talk about their faith standing, but finance is important because usually they're bringing in two different perspectives on money, right?
Mhm.
And one of them have really bad spending habits or want to always have the latest, and that becomes a challenge. Other thing that we talk about a lot of is sexual partners. How many partners have you had? Like, have y'all talked about that? Because I don't care what any man says, a man has a hard time accepting the fact that his woman has had more men than him, have had more partners than just him, right? That bursts your ego when you realize that and she wasn't a virgin when she got with you. So you talked about this, and then Marcus made a really good point, which I was going to say is when you already have children coming into this relationship, right? And what does that look like? Because that father or that mother may still want to have a role in that child's life. How are you going to balance that out? And we see that sometimes, even some of our sons' football teammates, right? You see that sometimes in those relationships, and it can be very, 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 very interesting in that regard. But these are the things that are normally not wanting to be discussed. One of my greatest pet peeves, and Pop, you mentioned about I have the right to say no during their marriage, is I tell couples, don't ask us for premarital counseling. You already have your wedding date set. Right? Don't come to me talking about we getting married in January and it's November. Can I do your counseling? The answer is no. Right? I'm not going to rush the sessions to accommodate your wedding date. I'm not going to stroke your back. I'm going to tell you ain't ready to get married. And you may decide you want to proceed, but I'm not signing your license as the officiant of your marriage when I don't have the confidence this marriage is going to work itself out. And so there are couples who like, well, can we just do one session? And that'll be a no. It doesn't work that way. And then when you get in these sessions, as you all mentioned, there are things that people just don't want to talk about, or as Mark mentioned, they're so doped up, they have not discussed at all. No, I don't want children, spending habits. How involved is your mama going to be in our wedding, in our marriage?
That's it.
Right. Are we going to be able to keep, do we have to always, like, those things are important to have discussions about that people don't want to talk. I know you love your mama and that's great, but remember now, you marrying me. Like, compete. Like, those things need to be discussed, and people don't want to talk about that type of stuff.
But you know something, Pastor?
I done got fired up.
If I can jump in, the thing is, they don't discuss it, but they've been thinking about it the
I'm
whole
thinking
time.
about it. There you go.
They've been thinking about it
But never
because
brought it up.
somebody feels a certain way about that, but
Mhm.
until you bring it out of them, then now you're bringing out what they've been thinking all along,
Yeah.
but they've never discussed or never had the courage to discuss with one another.
Yeah.
But they've been feeling that way.
They're feeling that way.
You know,
But I like to go. We talk about digging deeper. I want to take you back in your family.
Mm.
I want to know what your daddy was to your mama. What kind of relationship that was.
Yeah.
Where did you pick up how to be a man from? Uncle Bubba, who had 5 or 6 chicks in the background, and so you think no. Let's put that on the table. I need to know what was dissension like in your home.
Yeah.
What was conflict like in your home?
Yeah.
Because it's going to affect you because you don't know how you're going to handle conflict.
Right.
So how do you have all of those things? Family of origin to me is so vital.
Really good.
So vital.
That's
Because
really good.
that tells you we pick up stuff from our family. And many times that stuff is wrong. And we tend to bring that right into our marriage.
So I was going to say, you don't know how to. Sometimes they don't know how to let it go because the Bible say,
That's
they
true.
leave their mother and father to cling to their wife.
Yeah.
They don't know how to abandon their world because they want to bring in their past to make that their marriage, and then realize that's not the way it's going to work.
So you all have listed a lot of issues that should be addressed, and I don't want our listening audience to miss any of them.
Yeah.
As we've talked about formative experiences, talking about family and friends, finances, getting specific about how you spend money, what are your priorities about money, sex, who you've had, your partnerships, children. All of these things are so important. I know I might have missed some, but I wanted to make sure that our listening audience is hearing that there is no stone that should not be unturned. The problem from a psychological perspective when it comes to why we don't talk about these things as we're entering in these relationships is we don't like distress. As human beings, we don't want to feel distress. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. And so when we hear someone say, I don't need a third person to tell me what to do, they must reconsider how well do you tolerate the ability to hear hard things about you and to even speak hard things. It is natural for us to try to avoid it. And so that third party is so important to get us to address those things, as you all just said, that we've been already thinking about, that we have questions about, that we are concerned about. And as Pastor Whitfield said, in a safe space, because that person that's trained as you all are will navigate it in such a way where no one has to walk away feeling hurt and harmed other than maybe concerned about the decision they've made. One of the other things I wanted to add is that in premarital counseling, when I'm working with people, I am always challenging them about their core value system. What are your core values and beliefs? Not only in God, but what fundamentally do you believe about life? What fundamentally do you believe about people in general? Because the one part that is difficult to change about a person is that person's character, which is tied into those core beliefs. So if you can get them to start talking about what they believe about all these different facets of life, then you start to get to recognize, wait a minute, you all don't even believe the same things. How are you going to make that work? Not only do you not maybe possibly don't believe in God, but you don't believe, and you all have talked about role expectations, that a woman should this, or a man should that, or I should do this. So talking about core values and belief systems is critical. One of the other questions that I want to lay before you is, why is it that it's important for persons to be brutally honest about what they're feeling and experiencing in premarital counseling.
I feel like if you're not open and honest, you're setting yourself up for failure because you're marrying a mask. And then, like Marcus said later down, like 6 months later, that person shows up and you're like, who is this? Or I even talk to women who come to me and complain. And my first question is this the first time? No, well, it happened before, but I just let it slide. So now you created this explosion when you could have talked about it in the beginning, and now you've gotten to this point where you're completely frustrated and you didn't even have to let it linger like that. So I think being completely honest is a must.
That's a good point.
Right.
So just yesterday, Taki and I were sitting in the car after coming back from getting wings, and I was saying this to her. I was like, anybody that says me and my spouse, we never argue, I'm unimpressed. And I said, here's why I'm unimpressed though. I said, because usually what that means to me is that one of them just is a non-confrontational, peaceful person. So they choose just not to engage. That, to me, that doesn't mean you guys don't argue. That means somebody has just made up in their mind they're not going to go down that road. Doesn't mean they don't have an opinion. Doesn't mean they're not upset about something. So for me, being brutally honest is if you keep suppressing it, at some point it's going to become volcanic. There's going to be an eruption.
Absolutely.
Right? And when that eruption takes place, so much is going to come out that's been being held on for so long. And that also can lead to a spirit of resentment, right? Where you marry somebody you resent because you haven't been able to say what you want to say, or you're not feeling like you're being heard when you're saying it. And so I'm a believer of this. And I say this, I believe the person you marry supposed to also be your prayer partner, right? So how can you agree with me in prayer if I can't be honest with you in conversation?
Absolutely.
To me, that's important, right? We need to better have a conversation. And I know, because we're supposed to be best friends, I know that even when you're brutally honest, I know she's not out to intentionally hurt me, but it may hurt what she says because it's truth, right? But at the same point, our marriage is the better as a result of having these honest conversations versus somebody saying, you know what, don't worry about it. And this too shall pass is not going to work in this marriage. We got to have.
Really is not.
Oh, you was going to say something? Okay. Yeah, but I mean, to me, that's important. Brutally honest. Go ahead.
And also not being honest. I think sometimes some couples, the spouse it's the fear of being alone. It's the fear of, if I really show them who I am, or if I really ask them the truth, I don't know if I can handle like calling off the wedding and dealing with that embarrassment, or calling off the engagement and dealing with that. So sometimes it's fear too.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But here's the thing, to what you're saying right there. A lot of times, we're so busy worrying about the embarrassment. We don't want to call off the wedding, so we want to just proceed as normal. But, that's not a good way to go into a marriage either. If we have the honest questions, I would prefer to say, you know what? I'm going to call off the wedding for right. We're just going to hold it off for right now, mainly because there's some things that we've got to really, really look at and see if we could possibly work through them. And this is the thing. When you go in a marriage, you want to be able to go in with a clean slate with no surprises. Just imagine how many people are going in their marriage after they say I do, and the next morning they wake up and say, you start unveiling who you really are. And if all we had to do was be real from the beginning, somebody might want that bossy woman.
Yeah.
It just may not be this one that you just got married to. Somebody might want that controlling man, but it just ain't this woman that you just got married to. And you got to be real.
Yeah, that's it. I think. Yeah, that the bottom line to me is you got to be real. It's you got to put them questions before them to pull that out of them, such that they answer those questions truthfully. A lot of times.
Listen, babe. When you say listen to what they say, Don't hear what you want to hear.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Hear
right.
what they are saying to you.
Banging,
Hear
absolutely.
what they are implying to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you better be listening for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
In other words, what I'm hearing is that the importance of premarital counseling and honesty is it prevents you from entering into a relationship with someone that you really don't know, even though you may have been dating them for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and this comes to mind, given the generation and time in which we live. How do you provide premarital counseling for people who just met on Bumble and all these other, it looks like I just struck a nerve.
Well, they might need to find somebody on Bumble to
Counseling.
That what meeting like that, that to me gives way to an extensive premarital counseling sessions.
What they need to do is go watch TV and watch these shows like Married at First Sight, and they will get the picture of
The
what
real
they're
picture.
walking into. That will tell them what they're walking into. The success rate on those marriages are very low. I don't even see how these shows are still on TV.
The drama, though.
Entertainment.
That's it right there. The drama.
Can I just say this, though?
Yeah.
I think this is critically important to say for the viewing audience as well. I'm a strong proponent of premarital counseling, right? I really am. But I'm also a strong proponent of picking the right person or couple to do your premarital counseling.
Correct.
Everything, all the advice we're giving them is based on what we'll do. But there are some couples who look at premarital counseling as just a box check, right? Like I said, they already have their date set. They're getting married on this date, regardless of what comes out in that session. They won't just come by and say, we did counseling, yes, check. And for me, as a counselor, as a pastor, but also as a counselor, if I'm not willing to tell that couple, I don't believe you're ready to get married, then I shouldn't do their premarital counseling session, right? Because otherwise, what you're doing is that because there are things that we'll discern or we'll hear in that session that we know can be long-term detrimental to the health of that marriage. And if we're not going to be honest up front and say, hey, listen, y'all need to hear what's being said here. This can't be about, we can't become hirelings. We're just doing it because they're going to pay us a certain fee to do it. We really have to be willing because you mentioned, Dr. Faye, about, some of these dating sites, people meeting each other. Part of the reason why people are doing that is because they want to do away with the drama of this natural dating and things of that nature, and they want to go right into and then so on and so forth, or they got to a certain age, whatever it may be. You have another way too. There's certain. I was sharing this with the Whitfields before. There's a certain like resort companies that literally will now tell couples, if you hire us, we'll do all of your planning, we'll pick your location, everything will be laid out. And now what they're doing what I call plug and play, right? They're literally finding a minister, plugging them into the officiant role, paying them a certain amount to cover the one session and the wedding. They pay them. There's no relationship pre-existing. It's just that one day people get married and you don't know what's going on. There are some people who still have confidence in the clergy, right? Or in the officiant. And we have to be willing to be honest. I had a young man who I've done his premarital counseling before in the past. And they did well. He said all the right things in session. I did their wedding. He became a nightmare for her, right? I mean, like a nightmare for her. It ended up not working out that they got married. He reached out early October. I hadn't heard this guy in 4 or 5 years. Hey, I'm getting married on October 28th. When if you can do my wedding? First of all, it was FAMU homecoming. So the answer was going to be no. but he has done no premarital counseling. I hadn't heard from him in 5 years. He admitted in the text that he had done wrong. The previous 2 marriages didn't work out. This one's gonna work out now. And I finally said, man, listen, bro, like as much as I appreciate you reaching out, my answer is no. Like the success rate here is not good. And no communication over 5 years lead me to wonder, what have you been doing in that time frame? And even if you're trying to offer to pay me, but my concern for premarital counseling is when couples think is not necessary. I know my partner. I know them well. I know what's going to make them happy. No, like something is going to happen. I'll give you another great example real quickly. My dad went through sickness and cancer radiation treatment. and he went through 58 rounds of radiation treatment over a period of time. That's the wrong time to find out you married the wrong person.
Mhm.
When a loved one gets sick, your mom or dad gets sick, and now you got to show some level of attention to them. For one time, you find out for your spouse saying, "Well, hold on now." Like you gotta have these conversations. How do we handle our parents getting? Oh, like those are real conversations that we don't understand. Another one is what church we gonna go to when we get married.
That's right.
Like, are we going to same church? What are we gonna do here? Like these are things we're not discussing. And being brutally honest, I know that's your family's church, but I don't want to go to that church. Right? Can we talk about this?
Yeah.
You
But
know, another one, you had brought it up. Oh my God, and it just lost me. But we talked about conflict resolution, but also just how to weather, like I said earlier, how to weather the storms of life. You know, you never know what life is going to bring.
Yes, sir.
And if you're not prepared to weather that storm or
Yes, sir.
prepared to, you know, in advance for if a storm comes, then that will, you know, possibly put the dagger of death in your relationship, in your marriage. You know, I mean, it took us 7 years to have kids, you know, and we did not know the things that God was going to take us through to bear children. But we knew how to deal with the storms through when we went through premarital counseling with our pastor. And it helped us for when that storm came, we knew how to stick together and not turn on each other. You know what I'm saying? But that's things that premarital counseling teaches you, because the natural things of life is when storms get heated, you know, you turn or you take it out on somebody. And the first person you're going to take it out on is the one you love the most, was going to push them away. But that's nature. But that's why marriage counseling is important, because those are when you're learning how to work as a team, you know, how to create a playbook as a team for life.
Really good.
Yeah.
Man, really
But
good.
another thing too is when you go through premarital counseling, there's some things that are going to come up that maybe right now you're not experiencing in your marriage, but when you hit that bump in the road, it serves as a reminder for you. Oh, I remember when we were in premarital counseling, they said da 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 da. But I tell you what, see, if you go in like me and Danny with no premarital counseling, I think the only thing that saved us, I cannot even say it was age, because we were young when we got married, but I think it was the era that we got married in. There was no social media, no internet, none of that. You know, I think that is what kind of helped us to get to a point. And then we had to experience some of those storms that brought us closer together.
Yeah. It was those storms that really pulled us together. Whereas early on, yeah, I was ready to get on that horse and ride it out in the sunset.
Was I.
But
I asked that question about social media because unfortunately we're living with a generation that not wanting to weather the storms. And so I do believe that it is a type of accountability that we have to take on, a pastoral accountability, a counselor, therapeutic, psychological accountability, where we're able to do, as Pastor McGhee has already said, we have to be the ones to say, so you all met on Bumble, you only been together for 1 month, so how many months of premarital counseling are you willing to be committed to? Because it's going to take, and be honest about it. And if they say, well, if you can't do it, we want to get married, we don't want, well, I'm sorry, I can't do it. We have to be the ones. And we have to be okay with asking the hard questions. We have to do that. And so, Pastor Whitfield, you brought up God as one of the first questions that you would ask about in terms of the belief system. Can you all talk about why it's so important to even consider God in terms of premarital counseling, what their faith is and how they are yoking together? Can you all talk more about that?
Well, I guess for me, I want to know individually. I think I do that. We do a survey first, and that's part of the one session that we do. Their relationship with God. I want to know, first of all, from you, where do you stand with God individually, and then we connect as we go on through the session. But that's foundational for me. And I think I spend maybe 2 sessions on that because that's important to me. Because if the foundation is not laid, if God is not the foundation of your marriage, then it's going to be shaky. And so I'm going to spend that time talking with you how it is important for you to have that foundation of knowing who God is and your relationship with Him. Because if we ain't got that this way, we ain't gonna work it that way. So we got to work that thing.
In other words, if they do not have a relationship that's vertical, that is strengthened in certain ways, how would they be able to relate to one another?
Won't be able to.
And you know, when you get married, you went into a covenant with your spouse. You're going into a covenant with your spouse and God. And that's another component that we bring out, the fact that you're going into a covenant, and how, you know, I explain it through like braiding hair. It's 3 cords in there. And so if you take one cord out and twist it, you're saying that, okay, God, you hang out over here until I say I need you. And it's just the 2 of you. Well, the 2 of you over here acting like fools. Y'all saying what y'all want, how you want, don't care how nobody take it. But if you keep God intertwined into your braid, you're going to always consider, how would He want me to handle this thing? You would consider wearing the character of God, being cautious about how you speak to your spouse, because a lot of things that you say to your spouse, you're not going to be able to take back. When you break them down enough, you are not the person that can build them back up. So God has to be a part of the counseling.
Yeah.
And you both parties have to have an understanding of where He fits into their marriage.
Yeah.
And how He's going to help them make their marriage better. Because the things that we go through in a marriage, God did not say life was going to be easy. And marriage is a part of life.
Yeah.
So of course it's not going to be easy either. So when we have Him working with us and not on being on the outside, like me and Danny had him at the beginning, we can accomplish much more together as a team, as a trio, when God is included in our braid.
And I guess that was something that I learned, that we learned later. We may have had Him, but He was not a part of the formula. He was not a part of the formula. No matter what we went through, never was He consulted. And so as we grew in, and these things became huge to us, that's when we had to stop and realize that we're not going to make this journey unless He's in the formula. Unless He's in we're not going to make it. Then I had to realize my role as the head of the house, that I need to cover this marriage. It's for me to soak it, such that when we have these things, just the 2 of us not part of this conversation. There's another person that's part of this conversation that's going to help us to get through it.
That's good. That's good.
And you know what? It still goes back to the fact that we did not have premarital counseling at the beginning, because if those things had been laid out for us, I think we would have gone into our marriage much different. Yes, we went in with love, and love was able to hold us until we made sense of things and how we needed to be handling things. And it took us a while to get on that train, but we got on that train and we started rolling.
I love it.
What do you feel about, you said we might not have had, I think you said we might not have had him, but we never, you mentioned the fact that God was there, but you never used God as a model.
I think, well, what I understood from
Probably
him,
the part of your life, but you didn't
had it. Both of us had it, but we also had our own little personality. That was back when Rhoda would say what she wanted to say, how she wanted to say, to whosoever she wanted to.
Hello.
Yeah, she was there. She lived in.
Yeah.
And so, you know, once Rhoda went through something, then she was, I got to a place of life is too short. And whatever you say, make sure that it is not anything that you have to come back tomorrow and ask for forgiveness on. Because you can say it right today. You can say, you don't have to say it any kind of way. So that once we got to that point, we were always inclusive. We had God in the midst of what we went through, everything that we experienced.
So go ahead, Faith. Go ahead.
I remember it's because what I wanted to emphasize is that both of you did have God, even though, as Danny said, Pastor Whitfield, that he didn't, you all weren't necessarily consulting the model. The only way that you could say to yourself, I need to be careful what I say, is the Spirit lived within you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the key that I think why it's so important that we're consulting and talking about and understanding the foundation of God in premarital counseling. Because when God lives within us, that's the best place to start. And that's the kind of space we can work in to help people to recognize the Holy Spirit that lives in you don't act like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we can help people to come back to that space. So when people are looking for premarital counseling, what should they look for? What kind of person should they look for? Who should they look for? And what kind of person?
Tell them the truth. Not their friend, not somebody that know them, somebody who can be objective and tell them the truth. And they can,
Amen.
They don't be afraid to make them mad.
Yeah, you cannot Google how to stay married or
Okay.
premarital advice. You can't Google that. Don't pull your phone out for that.
Yeah, that's good.
How do you stay married?
That's good. I heard you. No friends, no one you know, and especially no one who's not going to be able to challenge you.
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah.
Any other suggestions about how you look for someone with regard to premarital counseling?
I believe that you need somebody that's going to be transparent as well. You know, a lot of times, you know, we want to be a teacher, but we don't want to be able to be open where whoever is sitting up under us can really, really see the real person. And I just believe that you have to be transparent. Sometimes you have to be willing to share things that you have experienced, because how are they going to know that they're not the only person that is traveling on that road unless you're willing to share something that you experienced on that very same road?
That's important. That's important to for them to hear coming from you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of couples coming to us now are very young.
Mm-hmm.
And we always share how we started, how we got to where we are now. That it took some work. And so when we had our ups and our downs, how did we get through them? And when you can open up and share with them, many times it'll open the conversation up more in the session, that they begin to share some of the things that they're going through as far as conflict or dissension that they may have among themselves. So being able just to say, we've gone through some stuff and we made it through it, and you're going to go through some stuff as well. You know, so hey, just open up to them, I would say, and again, pull those rough stuff out for them. I share them hard questions with them, you know, because they need to hear it.
Yeah.
You know, this ain't no cakewalk. This is hard, and it's hard work that's gonna take you to work it 365, 24/7.
Yes, sir.
It ain't gonna be easy.
Yes, sir.
But don't think you coming here sitting with me these couple of weeks that it's gonna be patty cake. It's not gonna be patty cake.
Mm-mm.
And so you got to be able to cut the mustard and get through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna use that term.
Cut them up.
Cut the
And
mustard.
That's
And not
a
only
Ralph
that,
McGhee expression.
it's also like you said, being transparent. I just told somebody recently, me and Darrick are about to hit 21 years this month. I said it's two becoming one daily. Just because people say you're two becoming one, it's not gonna happen overnight. Like
It's
we're
not.
almost 21 years in, and we're still two becoming one daily. So
We
transparency
listen,
is
we
very
43 kids,
Oh,
and we still two becoming one. And the reason why, and let me tell you why, because you're constantly evolving.
Yes.
The person that you were when you first got married, that's not the person you are now. She's changed. She's free, isn't she, Darrick?
She says what she wants to say. Yes.
Be free, my sister.
And unfortunately, no matter how hard we try, when we first meet people, we always present our best selves.
Hello, somebody.
Yes, ma'am.
Best self goes with us for quite some time because of those formative experiences. And then as time happens, we're evolving. And so the key is helping couples to understand that maybe this person is here for a life lesson for a season, as opposed to a life lesson that you all are going on together forever.
That's really good.
But unfortunately, some people think this is the one that I'm supposed to be learning life with forever, when they've only come into your life for a season. We want to make them be there for eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good.
So I've heard that looking for someone to counsel, premarital counseling, that person has to be transparent. They need to be honest. But I'm also wondering, do we need to look for someone who has experience, demonstrate that they've been working with couples, and we have to be okay with being able to look for someone that we find that, yeah, they have a reputation for people not getting married.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm smiling because I've tried not to have that reputation, but that has happened to me.
Hey.
I am clear to say, I don't think you're ready. So my next question is, when do you decide that this couple is not ready? What are the signs that help you? Because I believe it's important not only to know it for yourself as a counselor, but to be able to share that with them, because that's information they need to make better decisions going forward.
I think when couples come in, and there's always dissension or conflict, that they come in with it, and it never settles, and it gets to a point where one of the two shuts down. And so you're only talking to one person. So how is that relationship gonna ever get where it needs to be when you got one participant? Both of you got to work at it. So if they're not, if I can't see the them improving or getting to that point where they need to be as far as opening themselves up and being vulnerable, I would say to them, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you,
Shut it down.
but may not
May the Lord watch.
The two main red
tell you
flags that I
something
have,
else.
like you said, the two red flags that I have are one, when you can sense that they're not being honest with each other.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not being honest with each other. And then two, if they're not willing to grow. If I can sense that they're being stubborn, they're not willing to admit when they're wrong, because at the end of the day, you know, they're going to have ups and downs. People are going to argue, you know, but if they can't get through conflict management,
That's it.
in premarital counseling, then it ain't no point of walking down the aisle. So if they're not willing to be honest, if they're not willing to grow, then those are my two big red flags.
Because basically what they're showing at that point is they're not willing to work.
Mm-hmm.
They're not willing to work, put in the work. And I tell you, I've seen where you can have one partner that is very open in their sharing, and then the other person is giving you one answer. Good. It's okay. They don't want to say nothing.
They don't want to be there.
Huh?
Right.
They don't want to be there.
They don't want to be there.
Going through the motions.
They don't want you in their business, in essence. They don't want you, you know, and this is the same way people act. You have some people that act when it comes down to going to couples ministry. They think that the couples ministry is there to be in their business. No, it's a place where you can come together, like-minded people, and you all can have open discussions. And it's another means of seeing that, golly, I'm not the only one that has experienced that. You know, I don't care what nobody says. If you're not interacting with other couples, you think you're the only one on that aisle. You're the only one got a disagreement going on with your spouse. I almost said your husband, but your spouse every other week. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
Everybody is trying to put in time to work their marriage.
Yeah.
Stay on the train. It might get derailed, but go on up there and be the captain and get that train back on that train.
Yeah. I will. So I try to make it to two. Underline try. I'm a believer though, like before you conclude that first session, you ought to give a real honest and thorough recap and assessment of what transpired in that session, right? Like sometimes if you let people talk, they'll tell. We've had many sessions where you knew that guy didn't want to be there. Like he literally was being drugged there by her. And he was giving one-word answers. I'll give you a really good one. This couple was already married when they came to our church, but I knew they didn't have premarital counseling and they came out. They basically met it was spring break one year in Panama City. They had a one-night stand. She popped up pregnant. Different races. She was white, he was black. They had a very toxic marriage. They joined our ministry, and they needed marital counseling. So we sat down with them, and I flat out asked at some point, you could just tell like she was emotional and doing a lot of talking. He was kind of sitting there, and I asked him, I said, I'm gonna ask you a question, man. And he was from the big city, so he knew how to be. He was a good hustler. Right? And I said, if she hadn't gotten married, when she hadn't got pregnant, would you have married her? And he was like, no. And I looked right and I said, listen, so you telling me your 2-year-old daughter now has the responsibility of keeping your marriage together? Wow. And he looked at me, but when he said I never would have married her if she hadn't gotten pregnant, it was as if that was the first time his wife had ever heard him say that. Here's the reality. The reality is what brought them to our office had already been saying, I don't want to be with you. To add to that, this brother he hated white people, but married to a white woman, and his child is mixed. And I bring this up because I finally said, hey, did you ever have premarital counseling? No. They got married because she got pregnant and it was a cover up, right? And they wanted to do this. And so at one point I found this, she went out crying. My wife went behind her. Two of us were in the office, myself and him. And I looked at him, I said, man, dude, you a hustler. I said, man, I'm from LA, man, I can sniff you out. You a hustler. You just big game. You talk loose, you're a hustler. And I just kind of, after that, I refused to meet with them again because I knew what was going on. Now, I bring that up only in this regard, not only just because they didn't have premarital counseling, but also it's because there was no need to continue down this road because he wasn't bringing truth to the sessions, right?
Yeah.
He was trying to get over on even us. And that's why I called him out, was because now you run a game on her, but the run game on us as well. I see what you're doing here. And so I gave an honest recap at the end of that session. Of course, he didn't want to hear it, but because he's won her over, like she's mesmerized, she's doped up, she's hearing what she wants to hear. This dude is telling you, I don't love you, I'm not in love with you, I don't want to be with you. We got a child together, that's why we're together. That's it. And you know, she's thinking she can change him. And I want to just say, when you talked earlier about picking counselors, and Marcus made a really good point. The person who's going to be honest with you, right? Like put the truth right in front of your face. And I think at the one real session, right, where you really are asking questions, hearing answers, you can discern and assess easily, this ain't gonna work out. Now you may make it to that second session with them, just kind of confirm what you've been discerning, but it don't take more than probably a session in the beginning of a second session to realize that this ain't gonna work itself out. And this is why, again, couples who come already with their date mapped out, they're just trying to check a box, right? They're gonna go on without it. And usually we are accurate in our prediction that this marriage ain't gonna work. Like y'all need to step back. But sometimes they got family pushing them. They done started ordering stuff. They got the date mapped out. They got this look, all this type of stuff. And this stuff is toxic. And we can't be the only ones as the counselors that's discerning the toxicity of this relationship. This is not a good situation. Like the sex cannot be that good that you can't see this toxicity in your marriage. Right? You're talking about you got kids involved. Like there's too much going on here. You need to pull this thing back. And that's not even just those who meet online. Sometimes it's people, you know, because it's a family pressure, they're getting older. A lot of scenarios where, or they see somebody else who look happily married. And we know this, right? We see people who really good, they're good at performing that their marriage is great. All the social media posts is they walking on the beach together, holding hands, going overseas together. That's not the reality, right? Your wife is not going to wake up, bruh, every morning with her hair done. You're going to see some bonnets.
That's right.
Right? You're going to see some house shoes. You're going to see some moo-moos. Like, you're going to see no makeup. Like, you're going to see stuff like that. Like, bruh, like this is the reality. My wife and I, we never lived together before we got married. When we came back from our honeymoon, I was so used to her getting up at a certain point and say, I got to go home. Finally said, hey, man, don't you got to go home? She's like, no, I live here now, bro. Like, I ain't going nowhere. But we had to adjust to something as simple as coexisting in the same place. I'm used to living by myself. Stuff go in certain places in my house. Hey, don't leave your shoes there. Like those things.
Part of the military.
I was not part of the military. But my point of all that is, these are things that came out in premarital counseling that I just never thought about. Like the simple thing that could become so major. Another thing real quickly is which one of y'all shut down and don't want to talk no more, right? Because even guys do this, right? Guys will shut down and go weeks and months without even talking to their own spouse. Like those things need to be talked about. But sometimes you've seen that in mom and dad or grandparents, you think that's normal behavior. And so when you hear that stuff come up in counseling session, if they don't want to work, they don't want to hear you and grow, then those are red flags. Don't even waste your time continuing. Like you just know up front. So what you said, Dr. Faye, I don't mind your reputation that says marriage the marriage people don't get married when they go to, hey, that means you're doing a good job. That means you're being honest with them about this ain't gonna work, y'all. That's really not gonna work.
Let me say something before we move on, because Darrick brought something out. He said, not living together. Now, there are people who live together that feel, well, we lived together for 3 or 4 years. We don't need premarital counseling. But here's the thing, what they don't realize is when you are living together, you're getting a false read of what marriage is all about. You are not in a committed relationship. At any moment, you can get up and say, enough is enough. You don't have to go through no divorce. You don't have to go through no annulment. You just pack your stuff and go where you came from. There's no commitment. And so what happens when they are living together, they are forming habits.
Mm.
And the habits is they are single. Yes, they are roommates in essence. They live together. And so what they're doing is when they get married, they formed a habit. I do what I want. I go what I want. I can hang out with who I want to. And I don't really have anybody to answer to because that's not my husband. That's not my wife. I can go out with my girls. I can go out with my boys. But then, so what happens? You get married. And you know what you do? You take that suitcase right in there with you, thinking that you can still do what you want, not answer to anybody, because that's the habit that was formed while you were living together. And you figure you don't need to have premarital counseling, but you need to be running to somebody because some habits need to be broken now. And so when y'all get married, what happens? One person, well, what is wrong with you? One person has stepped into married life and one person still wants to be single. And listen here, that is a rubbish all by itself.
All by itself.
All by itself.
That's so good.
I worked with a couple who had been married, who had lived together for 10 years and decided to get married. And one of the things that I told them as we were working through the process was that there is a spiritual phenomena that occurs when you get married. Not just as Rhoda spoke about those patterns. Even with that, there is something that happens spiritually once you make that covenant agreement. Things shift in terms of mindset, the way we move and the way we operate. And they just could not see how things would change because they said, we've been committed to one another. We don't, we're not dating on the outside. We're not doing any of those things. But the day that they got married, that night, they were running into difficulty and said there was just something about the way that they were communicating with one another, the way that they were seeing each other, the way they were experiencing one another. So I'm just emphasizing what Rhoda said, because there is a difference. And even the things that you have been with someone for 10 years experiencing, there still may be discussions, conversations that you have not had. There could be ways in which you all are maneuvering and managing the money that you're concerned about that you haven't talked about. What I find often, that there are times when people have been together for 10 years and not happy sexually, but they won't even talk about it because they don't feel safe to have that conversation. And that is one of the topics. We didn't bring it up, but that is one of the topics. If you're afraid to approach that in premarital counseling with a couple, then you need to refer them to someone who can touch on that issue, because everything that that person may encounter in terms of the relationship must be dealt with.
Good.
Amen. That's good.
Amen.
Good. That's good.
So overall, what is it that you're saying that you want the individuals to leave premarital counseling with?
It's a game plan, a sense of understanding each other, and a game plan on how to make their marriage work. Because even in marriage counseling, we're not going to be able to address every issue, but the goal is to address how to address every issue. And so if they leave with a game plan, knowing that, okay, we know how to deal with the good times, we know how to deal with the bad times, we know how to deal with our finances, we know how to deal with our family, we know how to deal with if something comes up that's sudden, we know what we're going to do. Even though we may not know what is going to happen, but we have a game plan. I feel like that's a success for us.
I think that the truth of the matter is when couples invest the time and the energy and the effort into going through premarital counseling, it demonstrates a level of commitment that it's going to eventually pay off in the long run. So if we invest that time and the energy and the effort into going through marital counseling, it's gonna get us to that place that we need to get to.
Make the
And-
choice to
Go ahead, sister. I'm sorry.
sorry, make the choice to grow.
Yeah.
Make the choice to allow God to lead you all in every situation. Make that choice. Because you cannot do this without God. You need to have your relationship with God, and then you all need to have a partnership. You are in partnership with God. You're standing before God making a covenant. He's entering this into this with you, and you all are not alone in that. So make the choice to wake up every day, as you say, you know, to grow and to learn each other daily. And that trying to make that God math work, that 1 + 1 = 1. So it's every day and it's daily. Like you said, you know, we're 17 years in, and it's daily to make that choice to love my husband, to make that choice to not say everything that come up. So make that choice.
So I'm going preacher. I got three. Number one is hope, right? You want them to leave with hope, right? That especially if they come from a familial background where there's not success, right? There is hope that you're not going to continue that. Like there's hope that your marriage will work. Yeah. Help, right? That premarital counseling is designed to be helpful. And that's good and bad, right? Pointing out the things you guys need to put some work in. The last one to me is homework. As Marcus mentioned, we can't cover everything in there. So the hope is that when they leave there, that the conversation does not end because the session ended, right? That they're using what they've learned in their session as homework. They're having conversations, they're sitting down upon leaving, and they're continuing that as they're driving away or wherever it may be. They're having those real discussions because they don't want to repeat the history of marriage. My grandparents were married for 58 years before my grandmother died, right? That was in that generation. They had a lot of kids together. You know, my grandma wasn't going nowhere, no matter how bad. My granddaddy was strongly alcoholic for a long period of time. She wasn't going nowhere. And I respect that. But it wasn't always good either. Right. But she wasn't going nowhere. That was the one thing that we all knew in the family is grandma ain't going nowhere and he ain't either. They're going to work through it. And thank God it all worked itself out. But also my granddad had to put God back in himself and put things back in order. But that homework of being able to draw instantly and then later on pull back up things you learned in those sessions that will help you as you go forth. So my hope for couples is that they've envisioned their marital ministry beyond the wedding day. Mm-hmm. And that they are coming into the sessions to be open, to be honest, to as Marcus said, get the game plan and then execute the plays, right? That's going to help you be successful in this game called life, because there are unforeseen circumstances. You all mentioned about 7 years before you could have kids. We were told we couldn't have kids. And I was okay with that, right? Because I didn't marry my wife. Kids or no kids, I was happily married to her. We never talked about what that meant to her. And I would come home from work and she would be an emotional wreck. And I kept saying, sweet, we're going to be okay. It's okay. I didn't know that made her feel less than being told she couldn't have kids. And one day she just broke down. I said, can you please tell me what I'm missing? And she finally began to tell me. And I never thought, I thought as long as I reassure her, I'm not going anywhere, that was enough. I didn't know what it meant to her as a woman. Mm-hmm. And in that conversation, that was within the first 2 years of our marriage, 3 years of our marriage, with 2 years of our marriage, we were told we probably couldn't have kids. My wife had a major surgery the first 2 years of our marriage, so on and so forth. We had major tests that we had to draw back on that game plan and really start executing plays and reassuring each other of things. But you don't expect to be told you may not be able to have kids. And then how do you adjust to that, right? Because that's not just you adjusting. There are people in church saying, when y'all gonna have some kids? Y'all been married and when you gonna get pregnant, right? And every time they're saying this, they're pushing at least my wife further and further into this depression, I would argue, because they don't realize what we're dealing with behind the scenes. And so how do we ride this together? And those are real situations that may not come up on premarital counseling, but that game plan you gain in those sessions can help you execute when life does happen, because life is going to happen in a major way. And so my thing is, I'm hoping they walk away with hope, some help, but also homework where they're going to go in and put the work in, because premarital counseling is necessary, but post-wedding day requires you to put work in, right? You can't be content with a great ceremony. When we came back from our honeymoon, here was one reality. I went to the mailbox and I realized the bills never stopped coming, although we were celebrating our wedding. Right? We came back home to a mailbox full of bills. The bill collector didn't care about us getting married. We had to now figure out how we're gonna pay these bills. And that's critically important, is how do we make this work, where we keep God preeminent in our marriage, and we are doing things in the manner by which has been laid out. And so any couples that's listening, right, it's okay to say, hey, I don't think we need to change our wedding date. We need to really submit ourselves to some premarital. Let's figure out who is someone we can talk to and walk through this, because you want your marriage to last, right? So don't insult the success of your marriage by ignoring a critical piece that your marriage needs.
I would say the goal for premarital counseling would be, I would want them to leave encouraged. In the day and time we live in, it's just a piece of paper to some people. I want them to leave encouraged and know that marriage is hard, but it's worth it in the end.
Oh, that's
Amen.
good.
And also, that test gonna come, life gonna happen. But when you got God together, so your own relationship and God together, you can ride out any storm together.
That's true.
But it's better when you do it together than separate.
Amen.
Thank you all so very much. I want to conclude with a phrase by a woman, prophetess, whom I won't name, who said, some years ago, a wedding is not a marriage. And so for that reason, premarital counseling is so very, very important. And you've heard everyone express all the many reasons why it is so important. So I encourage you, if you're listening now or will be listening in a repeat of this and viewing it at a later time, if you are considering marriage, please make sure to look into a good premarital counselor, someone who's going to provide a safe, confidential space to challenge you. And don't be afraid to say, maybe I don't think I need to get married now.
Okay. Well, I would say in my closing, last week I was listening to the radio, and a young man always closes out. He's called the overseer, Nate the overseer. And he had something that he said that was so profound. And when he said it, all I could think about was marriage. He said, don't believe what you see and forget about what he said. There are a lot of things in marriage that you are going to experience, but it doesn't mean that you have reached a dead end. You can't just believe what's in front of you. Yes, you and your spouse came from different backgrounds. Yes, you and your spouse may do things differently, but believe what God said. And he's going to be with you if you allow him to be with you in your marriage.
Amen.
We want to thank all of you for being a part of this experience today. And it is our prayer that those of you who are considering going into marriage know that marriage takes work.
Amen.
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 With that being said, my dad had this saying too, over and out.
Yes, we did.